Okay, good morning, everybody.
Just call it in quantity.
Shmuel Aleph, chapter 26. We had a question at the end of last week's shiur asked by Johnny Halpin. Johnny, do you remember the question?
No.
Does anybody remember the question?
No.
Okay, well, neither did I, but I always listen to the end of the last week's shiur when I'm preparing for this week so that I know where we got to. And the question was, and I can't find the source, so you're going to have to help me here, Johnny. What you said in last week's shiur at the end was that Rav Steinsaltz said that David instructed Avishai to kill Shaul. And my reading of this is that Avishai took that upon himself, and David actually commanded him not to do such a thing. And I went to the Steinsaltz because I've got the Steinsaltz Tanakh, and I couldn't find where he said that. So can you help me and tell me where you saw that, because I can't find it.
Okay.
I just wanted you to know that I did try and do my homework.
Okay, I'm sure you did.
You know, it's interesting, while you're looking for that, I'm talking about doing my homework. I still do it in the same way I used to do it at school, which is right at the very last minute. I was never a great student for being organized. I would be, right, okay, what needs being done? Right, okay, we'll get it done. Lastminute.com, that was me. So I was looking at this last night after Shabbos for this morning's shiur. So, but I couldn't find it. So I don't know whether you might have misread it, Johnny, or whether it's somewhere where I haven't looked.
Where exactly are we up to?
We're in chapter 26.
Yeah.
It's talking where Avishai says he wants to kill, verse 8.
Okay.
So we'll carry on while Johnny is Johnny's looking and seeing if he can find what the source of that question was. So we'll carry on where we left off. Apart from that question, what we were in the middle of doing was asking a very clear question, and that is, why do we need chapter 26 at all?
Your sound's going in and out.
Oh, bloody internet thing. I thought we'd solved this because I did a conference the other day and I didn't drop off once.
Very clear for us.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If I go all wobbly, just somebody tell me, and I'll try and I don't know what I'll do. I'll just wait until it stops going on wobbly. But anyway, what we were doing is asking the question about chapter 26, why we need it at all, because it seems to be a repeat of chapter 24. Chapter 24, to remind you, was where Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. David took the opportunity of surrounding him, and he could have had the opportunity to kill him, did not do so, but instead cut off the corner of his robe, said to Shaul, look, I'm not a threat to you. I could have killed you. I didn't. Leave me alone. I'm not trying to usurp your throne. And Shaul says, I accept that. I was wrong. You were right. You're a good fellow. You're going to become the king one day. And please don't kill me when you do. And off they went their separate ways. And then we had chapter 25, which was the story of Naval and Abigail, which ends up with Abigail persuading David not to kill Naval. And David is so impressed with Abigail, a bit like the guy, remember that advert for a shaver? Can't remember which one it was now. Victor somebody or other. He says he was so impressed that he bought the company. Who was it?
Remington, Victor Kaya.
Yeah, Remington. Yeah.
Victor Kaya in Remington. He was so impressed that he bought the company. Yeah, remember that advert? So anyway, that was David. He was so impressed with Abigail that he bought the company and he married her. And that was chapter 25. Chapter 26 comes along. Yes, Paul? You're muted, Paul.
Yeah, this is where Johnny must have got it, because on verse 12, the commentary, the extra bit from Steinsaltz says, David, who perhaps regretted giving the order to Abishai and was concerned that he might kill the king if he was allowed near him.
Ah, yeah.
That's-
It could be that. Yeah, it could be
What
that.
passage is that?
It's on
Oh.
the top of page 328.
About 328.
Yes, it could be that, Paul. But if you read that,
That's the one. That's what I read.
okay. So if you read that carefully, it's not what it says. It's not what it's not. It doesn't say that David gave an order to kill him. It said he perhaps regretted giving the order
You're
to
broken up. You're broken up. You're broken
It's
up.
echoing, Johnny.
You're broken up.
Broken
Broken up, Johnny. Johnny, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Echoing.
Johnny, you've gone.
Okay, let me see if I mute you all. Maybe that will help. Hang on with the echo. Is that any better? Yes. Okay. So it was the I needed to mute you all. Okay. So anyone who wants to speak will have to unmute, and when you're finished speaking, mute yourself again, and then perhaps we won't echo. So what it says is, David, who perhaps regretted giving the order to Abishai, and was concerned that he might kill the king if he was allowed near him. Okay, so he gave an order to Abishai to come with him to Shaul, but he didn't give an order to kill him. I think that's where the misunderstanding has come, Johnny. I can see now why you thought that he'd given an instruction to kill him. He didn't give an instruction to kill him. He gave an instruction. He said, who's going to come with me? Not saying what he was going to do. And then you will see when we get to verse 12 that David himself takes the spear and prevents Abishai from doing so because, as Rav Steinsaltz says, he's worried that Abishai is going to kill him because Abishai has already said he wants to kill him. And David said, no, that's not what we're here for. We're not here to kill him. We're here to prove a point. So, okay, now I'm happy. Thank you for that, Paul. Well spotted. We've cleared that up. So let's go back to where we were. Thank you for that. Very important. So we are asking the question, why are we hearing another story about David cornering Shaul and not killing him? Because that's what we're hearing in chapter 26. And we've done it in chapter 24 already. Why do we need to be told it again? And we were in the process of showing you all the comparisons between the two chapters in linguistically. And we've done a few, and I'm just going to show you a couple more now. I'm not going to show you them all because it's getting a bit boring, but I'll show you a few more of the comparisons. So, for example, if we look in our chapter, which is chapter 26, I'll share the screen with you now. We're on chapter 26. Let's see, Jeffrey, could you read verses 9, 10, and 11 for us? You're muted at the moment, so you'll need to unmute.
But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can send forth his hand against the anointed one of Hashem and be absolved? David said, as Hashem lives, Hashem will strike him with illness, or his day will come and he will die, or he will go forth into battle and perish. It would be sacrilegious before Hashem for me to send forth my hand against Hashem's anointed one. Now, please take the spear that is near Saul's head and the flask of water, and let us go.
Okay, so let's have a look to compare that to chapter 24. Maybe, Jeffrey, if you put your finger in chapter 24 so that you can go back and forth. Have a look at chapter 24. I'll put it on the screen for you. And it is verse 7.
He said to his men, it would be sacrilegious before Hashem for me to do this thing to my Lord, the anointed of Hashem, to send forth my hand against him, for he is the anointed of Hashem.
Stop.
And David,
Stop there. Does that sound familiar to you? It's the exact same language.
Yeah.
Okay? Exact same language. So there's another one. Just another couple more. There's loads of them, but let's just cut off more. In both stories, David takes something from Saul. Have a look while we're on the same page. Verse 5, Jeffrey.
David's men said to him, Behold, this is the day of which Hashem said to you, Behold, I am delivering your enemy into your hand, and you may do to him as you please. So David arose and stealthily cut off a corner of Shaul's robe.
Stop there. So that passage tells us that the men of David said, kill him. And David did not kill him, but took something from him. In this case, the corner of his robe. Now let's look at our chapter and have a look at we've just said verse 8. Abishai, do verse 8 and then verse 12, Jeffrey. Verse 8.
Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day. Now let me strike him with the spear, driving it into the ground with a single thrust. I will not need to strike a second time.
Okay, stop there and go to verse 12.
So David took the spear and the flask of water from near Shaul's head, and they left.
Okay,
No one saw.
Stop there. So again, in our chapter, exactly the same thing. David's men want to kill him. Yes, coming to you in a sec, Paul. You can tell me where I've gone wrong. And then he takes something away. Go on, Paul. What's the difference?
Well, in the second case, it's explicit. I'm going to strike him through and kill him. And the other one, it just says you can do what you choose. It doesn't say to kill him.
You're right, but the implication is there. It's clear. I think it's clear from chapter 24 what the men want. You're right. It's more explicit in chapter 12. They've got braver, haven't they, in chapter 26? But I think you'd agree, even you'd agree, Paul, that it's implicit, if not explicit. But yeah, okay, fair point. Right. Now, at this point, David turns to Shaul in both cases, and he says to him, why are you chasing after me? And in both cases, David argues that the fact that he took something from Shaul and didn't kill him proves that he means no harm to him. And we can see that in chapter 24, verse 10 to 12, Jeffrey.
David said to Saul, why do you listen to the excuse me, of someone who says, behold, David seeks to harm you. Behold, this day your eyes have seen that Hashem delivered you into my hand in the cave today. And although someone said kill you,
Paul.
Well, it's although was in brackets, and although in brackets someone said to kill you, my soul in brackets took pity on you, and I said, I shall not send forth my hand against my Lord, for he is the anointed of Hashem.
Go on to 12 as well.
See now, my father, indeed, see the corner of your coat that is in my hand. For since I have cut off the corner of your coat and have not killed you, you should know and see that there is no evil or rebellion in my hand, and that I have not sinned against you. Yet you hunt my soul to take it. Okay,
stop there. Now let's look at our chapter and have a look at verse 18 to start with, 18 through to 23.
And he said, in brackets further, why is this, my Lord, pursuing his servant? For what have I done? What evil is in my hand? And now let my Lord, the king, listen to the words of his servant. If it is Hashem who has incited you against me, then he will be appeased with an offering. But if it is men, may they be cursed before Hashem, for they have driven me away this day from attaching myself to the heritage of Hashem, as if to say, go worship the gods of others. And now let my blood not be cast to the ground away from Hashem's attention, for the king of Israel has gone to seek out a single flea, as one hunts the partridge in the mountains.
Now just stop there and go to verse 22.
David then spoke up and said, "Here is the spear of the king. Let one of the attendants cross over and take it. May
Okay.
Hashem repay every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. My hand against the anointed one. Faithfulness. For Hashem delivered you into my hand today, but I had no desire to send forth my hand against the anointed one of Hashem."
Okay, so there you go. There's another comparison. They're both, by the way, meant David calls himself a flea. You remember that? He called himself a flea in chapter 24 as well. He says, I'm only just like a single flea. And that was in, if you want to just see it, I'll show you. It's in verse 15. There it is. Who after whom has the king of Israel come forth? A single flea. Same expression. Again, chapters, they're both chapters. And the final one I'll just show you is Shaul's response. Is in chapter 24. You will see, here we go, chapter 24. Have a look at verse 17, please. Chapter 24.
And it was when David finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" And Saul raised his voice and wept.
Okay, and then in our chapter, verse 17, also 17, chapter 26. Verse 17.
Oh, 17:26.
No, it's on the screen for you. Chapter 26, verse 17, top of the screen.
Chapter 26, verse 17. Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" David replied, "It is my voice, my lord, the king."
Okay, so there's another, stop there. There's another one. He calls him my son David, says, "Is this your voice?" He recognizes his voice. I think I've proved the point that the two chapters are very, very similar. Okay, so we'll leave it there in terms of the question. Now, the answer is, there's got to be an answer. Why are we told chapter 26 when it doesn't appear to be any different to chapter 24? Who would like to give me a suggestion as to what is the point of chapter 26? Michael Krause is unmuted. That means he's going to tell us something.
There doesn't seem to be any point in it. It just seems that the author has given two versions of the same story for some reason.
Okay. Are you saying that it didn't happen twice?
Yes.
Oh, so it only happened once, and we've just got two different versions of it.
Two different versions.
Okay, which means that possibly, and we talked very briefly about this last week. David Marks had something to say about it.
You said it should have been two authors, didn't you, John?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. We touched on this last week, that perhaps there were two different authors of Shmuel Aleph, and I said that was a bit heretical, and David Marks said that there was an opinion that the Shmuel and some of his disciples had written various different chapters, and so it wasn't entirely heretical to say that there was more than one author of Shmuel Aleph. So that's one possibility. Okay.
That's rather disturbing because there are some significant differences. There's a big,
Relationship between
there's
the
a big
two of
difference
them.
between cutting off a piece of rope and taking a spear.
Okay. This is a bit worrying because I agree with Paul.
Can I say something?
I'm going to expand on Paul. I'm going to ask Paul to expand on it in a minute when we've heard from everybody else. But so far, I'm with Paul on this one. Yes, Jeffrey.
Look, to cut the corner of the robe, he has to have a sharp knife. He could have just as easily cut his throat. And so there is a very, very similar situation there. It was in very close proximity. And similarly with the spear, he was in very close proximity to have able to lift out the spear and lift his flask of water. You know,
Okay.
now the situation is this, that David spent a lot of time fleeing from Saul's anger and pursuit. And that's maybe why he was called a flea, or called himself a flea, because he spent a lot of time doing it. And Saul spent a lot of time pursuing him. And even though David proved to him, and he had to do it twice, and we haven't yet gone further on this, but David's followers were all in favor of knocking Saul off the throne. And it was only David that resisted that, and his adherence to Hashem's anointed.
So you're saying the reason we're telling it is for emphasis.
Correct.
That's what I said. I agree.
Okay. All right. Jeffrey and Anita say that it's only been repeated purely for emphasis. Okay. Peter?
Yeah,
Can I put in my 2 bits first?
1 sec, Hannah. Peter first, and then you. Go on, Peter.
I want to agree with Jeffrey that I think he's saying it twice because it's so important that David doesn't kill Shaul, although not only did he have the chance to do it, but all his supporters, the team wanted him to do it, and God even gave him a free hand to do it. But the fact that he chose not to was so significant that he wants to mention it twice. And I think the mention of the flea is showing his modesty. I mean, there are times when David is not the most modest of person, but here is an example of he refuses to take the chance of killing David, which presumably was the sort of normal thing you do in those days. If you had a major conflict, you would resolve it by killing him, which is what his soldiers expected of him. But the fact that he didn't was very, very significant, so significant that they mentioned it twice.
Okay, excellent. All right, so there's another vote for emphasis. Okay, that's all right. Hannah, what would you like to add?
I'm struck by the fact that each time David's not saying that he doesn't want to kill Saul. What he's saying is that how could I possibly go against Hashem? And if we think back to his stand against Goliath, he there also says to Saul that he's doing it for Hashem. Yeah, he's going out to do Hashem's work and to get rid of to get rid of Goliath. And I agree with the fact that it's emphasis, but it's the emphasis of David's, what can I say, humility or acceptance of God as his divine guide as to what he does and what he doesn't do. We've seen that he wanted to kill Naval and that he has a hot temper, and Shaul's following him and chasing him and trying to kill him, but he controls himself because it's not God's will. He says,
okay, excellent. Okay, so that is another vote for emphasis, but there's another angle to it, and that is that it's there to show how positive this experience is in painting David as modest, God-fearing, all of those things. All right, okay. So I'm going to come back to Paul in a minute. Johnny, you haven't given your two penneth worth. Do you have anything to add?
I agree with Peter, I think. Peter puts it very well.
Okay. Right. So, Michael, you're out on a limb. You think it was two different authors, and everybody else thinks it was for emphasis, apart from Paul, who is going to now expand for us on what you've said before.
I am, okay. The only thing I can think of to say is that David knew he was anointed, that he himself was. So he doesn't have to kill Saul because he knows he's going to be the king because he's been anointed by God. So he's not in a hurry to kill Saul, and he wants to abide by the rules of listening to Hashem. And the two incidents are different. One he's got a particularly named individual with him. So that's why I think they are different incidents, unless otherwise it casts into doubt the veracity of both incidents.
Right, I agree with you on that. I do also think it's two separate incidents, and I think that the idea of that it's there for emphasis is very, very positive. I think that I would agree with all the things that you've said. I especially like the idea that Peter has said that this is demonstrating his humility to a high degree, because as he said, that sometimes he doesn't behave entirely that way, but this he does. Yeah, Anita.
Also, it said that Hashem put the army, I mean, I think there were about 3,000 men, he put them into a deep sleep. So, the danger of David being killed by the army as he approached Shaul was out. So Hashem almost gave him an extra chance to be able to kill Shaul by putting everyone to sleep.
The first time.
I can't hear you.
The first time, we'll come to it in a sec. Yes, Jeffrey, and then Paul. Jeffrey.
Sound's gone.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, you, and not Paul.
Okay, Jeffrey, you wanted to say something else? You're muted.
Yeah, it's interesting that Abishai, who was oh no, I'm sorry. Yes, Abishai, he was a mercenary, and he went with David. Now, mercenaries, they do it for pleasure. They do it for money. They do it for pleasure, and he was well known for it. So it is putting, if you like, more credence on the second time. It's putting more credence on this situation.
Right. Okay. Now then, I agree with all of that. Let me tell you what I think, having read a few different pieces. There is a difference here. There is the first time David cuts, first of all, the first time it happens by chance. Saul happens to go into the cave to relieve himself. It happens to go into Dafka, that cave where David was with his men. David did not plan it. He didn't go down to Saul's camp. He just happened to be there, and the opportunity arose because Saul came into his cave to have a wee. Right? And what did he do? He actually did something which he later regretted. This is my theory. And that is that he cut off the corner of his robe. That is a very symbolic act. He didn't kill him, but he cut off the corner of his robe. He then goes out, Saul, and his men will now see that he hasn't got a corner on his robe, that he's got a bit cut off, and will understand that David has done something, and that is a permanent thing. That robe is permanently cut, can't be undone. And it's a very symbolic thing. We know it's symbolic from what happened with Shmuel and Shaul way back after the debacle with Agag, when Shmuel says to Shaul, you're out, and a robe is torn there. That is very symbolic about taking the kingdom. That was the first time. And the second time, David actually goes down to Saul's camp. And he's going down for a reason. And what he does the second time is he does not do something which is permanent. He demonstrates to Shaul what he needed to demonstrate, which is that he is not a threat to him, by taking his spear and the jug of water. And as Jeffrey has quite rightly pointed out, you had to be in very close proximity to do that, because it even says it in the Pasuk that he took it from next to his head, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there we go. Verse 12 of chapter 26. Jeffrey, just read that out for us, please.
So David took the spear and the flask of water from near Saul's head, and they left.
So there you are. He was in very close proximity. David went down with no intention to kill him. We know that because he tells Abishai, don't kill him. And in fact, what we pointed out before, if you have a look in verse 11, David says to Abishai, don't kill him, but take the spear which is at his head and then the jug of water and let us go away. And he tells Abishai to take the spear. But as Paul pointed out, Rav Steinsaltz tells us that in verse 12, it's not Abishai that takes the spear, it's David that takes the spear. And Rav Steinsaltz says because he's frightened that Abishai is going to kill him. So there was never any intention that he was going to kill him. So what was the intention? The intention was to make amends, was to correct that which he did the first time. He regretted taking the corner of his robe because that was a step too far. It was a busha. It was a shame. It was a disgrace to the king to have his robe cut off and then having to go out after he's been to the loo to his men with his robe cut off. It's like, you know, the king going out with his flies open after the toilet, right? It's a disgrace, right? It's a symbolic thing. I know Paul's not happy about this, but let me finish before you. And you're fully entitled to have a go. And I like it. It's no problem. But the idea is that this time he takes the spear and he takes the jug of water, but it's not a permanent thing. He gives it him back. He says, send over the youth and take back the spear. And the spear is very relevant because what did Shaul do with that spear on 2 occasions? Correct. He flung it at David to try and kill him. And David takes the spear and he gives it back to him. He's not cut the robe here. Cutting the robe was, if you like, a tear at Shaul's heart. How do we know that? Because we know that when it happened with Shmuel, he begs him. He begs Shmuel to come with him to give kavod to Shaul in front of the people. To go out with a torn robe was a very disgraceful thing for the king. It could have destroyed the whole thing. The second thing is that it's possible, and this is one of the Radak says this, it's possible that in the first story, you could interpret it that David did not kill him because all of Shaul's men were outside the cave waiting for him to come out. So what would have happened if David would have killed Shaul in the cave? Shaul doesn't come out. What's going to happen? The men are going to go in and look for him. And they're going to go and try and kill David. So the Radak says that you could argue, if you wanted to, that David didn't kill Shaul the first time, not because of wonderful midas that he has, but because he was worried about Shaul's men outside. I'm not overly impressed with that myself, but that's what the Radak says. But the idea that there is this second time is a tikkun, it's a correction for what David did the first time, is not against what all of you have said with the emphasis. It actually adds to it, because what I'm saying is that this was for emphasis. We are told it for emphasis because it's something even better than he did the first time. The first time he could have killed him and didn't, but he cut off his robe. The second time he didn't even cut off his robe. He said, "Come on, Shaul, this is the second time I could have killed you, right? I'm not even going to take your robe this time. Here's your spear. Here's your water. Just believe me. I don't mean you any harm. I'm just a little flea." And it is for emphasis, but it's a tikkun. And he's come down a level of his anger, if you like, and his desire to show Shaul. And he doesn't cut the robe off. And he doesn't put Shaul to shame. I think we have to accept and understand how shameful it would have been for Shaul to have his robe cut off. That was why he did it. It was very symbolic. So, okay, let me stop there and say what you think about that idea. That this is a tikkun.
I've only got.
So what about you, Hannah?
What?
What do you think about that?
I only have one issue with that, and that is that we don't know where he cut Shaul's cloak. He could have taken a piece off the bottom that nobody would know, or he could have taken a piece off the top, around the collar, where everybody would see. We have no idea where he cut it. That's number one. And the other thing we often find in the Bible that God presents people with situations that are a test for them and their faith or their belief. He gave Abraham 10 tests. He gave Bnei Israel in the desert. He tests people, and possibly he set up God gave him a test to see. As you say, in the first one, the soldiers would have come looking for him. So maybe God decided, okay, this time I'll give him a clear get out of jail card, and if he wants to kill him, he can kill him and get away with it. And he's testing David's faith in God.
Okay, I'm not so sure that God is testing David's faith. David was the one that decided to go down. God didn't send him down into Saul's camp. Can you see the screen still, everyone? Have a look at this. This is in support of my theory. Verse 6 in chapter 24. This is after David has cut the corner of Shaul's coat. (24) verse 6, Jeffrey.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Afterwards, however, David's conscience troubled him for having cut off the corner of Saul's garment.
Stop there. Thank you. That's all I need to hear. David's conscience troubled him, according to Jeffrey's translation. Our translation says David's heart smote him, which is a more literal translation, means the same thing. Vayach lev David oto. And David had a pang of conscience. He felt bad about cutting off the skirt, cutting off the robe. He felt bad about it. And so that is the source of my theory. It's not in my theory. I didn't make it up. I read it. The theory that the second option, the second story, is a correction for what David felt bad about doing the first time. Now, let's accept. Where's Paul gone? Paul, are you happy with that? Okay. Let's accept that is a possible theory. The question is, what happened between chapter 24 and 26 for David to want to correct what he now thinks was an incorrect action? What happened to make him want to correct this this issue? Well, what happened between chapters 24 and chapters 26?
He got married.
Yes, correct. The answer is chapter 25 is between chapter 24 and 26. Correct. And in chapter 25, we see the story of Abigail. So the answer to my question in one word is Abigail. Here we see, chapter 26, we see a very positive influence of Abigail on David. We know that he listened to her in chapter 25 because he was ready to tear Nabal to pieces and everything that belonged to him. And Abigail came along and said, don't do such a thing. It doesn't behove you. You're going to be the king. That's not the way the king behaves. Let God take care of it. You know, Naval's a disgusting person like his name. He'll get his comeuppance from God. You don't need to dirty your hands killing Nabal. And what does David do? He listens. He listens to her, and he does not kill Nabal. And he says, Abigail, you're a very wise woman. I'm not going to do that. You've saved me here from bloodshed. Thank you very much. And he buys the company like Victor Kayam, and he marries Abigail. Now, having married Abigail, she continues to have a positive influence on him, because what does he say to Abishai, who wants to kill David, wants to kill Shaul? Let's just find the right pasuk that I'm looking for. About a minute.
Verse 9.
Yes, verse 9 says, don't destroy him. There's a verse in here, verse 10. Yeah, verse 10. Jeffrey, verse 10, chapter 26.
David said, as Hashem lives, Hashem will strike him with illness, or his day will come, and he will die. Or he will go forth into battle and perish.
Stop there. Where did he get that idea from? That he doesn't need to kill Shaul, that God will do it for him. Where did he get that from?
Abigail.
Abigail. That's right. That's what Abigail told him about Nabal. You don't need to kill Nabal. God will sort it out. And what happened? Nabal got killed by God. He had a stroke and died. So David now is recognizing the wisdom of his wife, of Abigail. So the difference between David in chapter 24 and David in chapter 26 is Abigail. So now we have the answer to two questions. The answer to the first question, the answer is Abigail. The first question is that we asked a few weeks ago. What's chapter 25 doing here in the middle of nowhere? This story about Nabal. What do we need this story for? We're in the middle of the story of Shaul chasing David, David running away from Shaul, David being able to capture Shaul and not kill him. What are you interfering with the story for by inserting chapter 25, which is the story of Nabal and Abigail? Well, now we know, don't we? Because chapter 26 could not have happened without chapter 25. Chapter 25 tells us that Abigail came along, taught David a good lesson, David took it on board, and now chapter 26, Abigail is having a positive influence on David. So we've answered two questions. One, what was chapter 25 doing there? And two, why do we need a second story in chapter 26 when we've already heard the same story in chapter 24? So the answer is, in the simple word, Abigail. Yes, Paul, you're desperate to tell me something.
I mean, that sounds very convenient, except you just pointed out two things. Firstly, in chapter 24, he didn't kill him, or he could have done anyway, without Abigail's influence. And secondly, again in 22, what you again pointed out, he regretted it. He regretted doing that, having that instant. So that was without her influence, both things.
Okay.
there's no real evidence of her influence on his subsequent actions in this particular context, in this particular situation.
Okay, well, you could argue that, yeah, okay. So I'm saying that he actually went and did something about it, but he didn't do anything about it when he felt bad about it. He just done it. He never went back and said sorry. Here, he went back and said sorry, and basically, and he does articulate the words God that Abigail said about Naval. That is, you don't need to do it, God will do it. So I think we do see Abigail's influence in verse 10. Maybe not as much as I emphasized it, but it's there. And I think that it certainly fits my theory that verse 25 is there for a reason, for the praise of Abigail and for the praise of David for listening.
Yeah.
Yes, Peter.
No, I think in 24 he cut the robe because he was angry and wanted to humiliate Shaul, which he did. But then after that, you know, presumably with the influence of Abigail, he was in a better place mentally and emotionally, and he regretted having humiliated the king.
Yeah. That humiliation is the right word that I was looking for before when he cut off his robe. That's absolutely right. And here he doesn't humiliate him. On the contrary, what he does is he does something which there is no sign of afterwards. He gives him that spear back and he gives him the water back. And we also we see that because that cutting off the robe is not only a humiliation, it's a sensitive action because it alludes to the imminent loss of Shaul's kingdom. So I think that's right. I think that's a good point. Now, what we also see is that
Echoing.
Echoing, Ben. Can you hear me now?
Still echo.
All right, we'll wait a few seconds until the echo's gone. How about now? Yes, okay. Goodness knows why this is happening, but anyway. So the other thing we need to just point out is that David initially in the first chapter does not rebuke his men. Only afterwards he rebukes his men, and that's why the Radak points out that it could be that it was because he was, he didn't like the look of Shaul's men attacking him. Whereas here, he doesn't get right at the beginning. He says to Abishai, "No, do not destroy him. That's not what we're here for." So that's another point there. Now,
would it be also you going back to the cutting of the robe on the first instance? Could it be just a situation where Saul is being reminded, it's been cut off from you. This is your second warning, so to speak. Samuel did it to start off with, and now David's done it. So it's more and more likely to come in the near future.
Okay, that's very interesting. More and more likely to come in the near future. Let me just talk about that in a sec. The only problem with that theory, and I don't think it's much of a problem, is that I'm not sure David knew that Shaul's robe had been cut by Shmuel, or I don't think David was there at that particular time. However, the Tanakh may well be telling us the same story to tell us it's going to happen soon. Where do we see that? You could have brought me a scriptural proof for your theory, Michael.
Double dreams.
Yes, very good, Paul. Excellent. The double dreams. In fact, Yosef says it, doesn't he? Yosef says at the beginning of Parashat Miketz, he says the 7 cows are 7 years, and the 7 ears of corn are 7 years, etc., etc. And he says the reason that God has given you 2 dreams is to show you that it's going to happen very soon. So that's a very good point, Michael. You could have given me that very strong scriptural proof for your theory. All right.
Now, Johnny, it could be tactical as well. The first time he humiliated him, accepting your point, he humiliated him. And although it sent him home for a while, it didn't last long. Perhaps he felt by not humiliating the second time that it would have a more profound effect on Shaul, and he wouldn't keep chasing him thereafter.
Possibly. If it was me, I'd have probably said the other way around. You know, your first warning, I'm not going to humiliate you. The second warning, I'm humiliating you. The third time, I'm going to bloody kill you. So, possibly, yeah, it could be. Well, could well be. It's certainly what David was trying to do. Either way, whichever way you look at it, your way or mine, what David was trying to do is to get through to Shaul, to leave him alone because he was not a danger. Yes, Jeffrey.
And so was his wife, because with his wife's example and his wife's explanation and so on and so on, she was able to guide David.
I think that's right.
As I said in previous shiurim, there's a good man usually has a good woman by his side, and that proves it.
Yeah, well, and maybe that is exactly what the Tanakh is trying to tell us here. That this chapter comes to tell us, this whole reason maybe of this chapter is to tell us the influence of Abigail, and for us to therefore, of course, learn from it for ourselves. Yeah.
I don't think Abigail gets the recognition she deserves. I mean, we've got some great Jewish heroines, but I don't think Abigail comes into that list.
Well, I think the problem there, Jeffrey, is not the fact that Abigail is not given the credit. The problem there is our rubbish education, which doesn't teach us Tanakh. If you were to go into the yeshiva of Gush Etzion in Alon Shvut and just say, well, who was Abigail? And they will tell you. Go into Ponovitch Yeshiva and ask them who Abigail was, and they won't have a clue, right? And that's a problem with the education system in large part due to the way we were taught as kids and as adults, and the way it should be taught, because it's very clear Abigail. That's why Abigail is a popular name amongst Jews, because Abigail was a hero. Far greater hero than Shaul, and Abigail is a popular name. So perhaps she doesn't get as much credit, but I think that's more a reflection of the poverty of our education than anything else, to be honest.
The chauvinism as well. The chauvinism of the teachers.
Possibly true. I mean, we do hear about Dvorah being a heroine, don't we? And Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah,
and Yael.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you compare it to the times, it's Jewish literature is less chauvinistic and more feministic than its contemporaries. Compared to modern times, less so. But it was pretty revolutionary at that time. You know, the writings there, the fact that women are given any kind of credit, the fact that, I mean, the fact that Dvorah was a judge, Dvorah was a leader, was really quite remarkable. That a woman would be a leader at that time. There's no such thing. So we just need to put it into context a little bit as well. Let's spend the last couple of minutes that we've got just looking at our chapter in a little bit of another little detail that we need to just look at. And that is verse 6 of chapter 26, please.
David spoke up and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and Abishai son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, saying, who will go down with me to Saul to the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with you.
Stop there. What about Ahimelech? Where's he gone? What did he say?
He's gone missing.
He didn't say anything, does he? So David says to the two lead mercenaries, if you like, who will come with me? And Abishai said, I'll go. Ahimelech had kept his head down. He's kept his head down. So the question is, why are we told that he turned to Achimelech? Why does David? What does this add to us to know that Achimelech was asked and didn't volunteer to go down? Only Avishai did. First of all, my question is, who is Achimelech the Hittite? Who is he? Secondly, why are we told about in this chapter? If he didn't have anything to do with it, he just was what? He just happened to be there. Who is he? Why are we told about him? And what connection might there be to a later story with this chap Achimelech? Okay, I'm not going to give you the answers to those questions. That's your homework to think about for next week. The question is all about verse 26 here. Who is this fellow Achimelech the Hittite, and what are we being told about him? He doesn't appear to add anything to this story. So I shall leave you on that point. Let's just recap for my sake what we have done today. We've finished off comparing the two chapters 24 and 26. We had an interesting discussion amongst ourselves as to why it was repeated, and the consensus was that it was for emphasis, to emphasize David's humility, to emphasize the fact that David had two opportunities to kill Shaul and didn't, and we spoke about the idea that this was a correction for the humiliation that David put Shaul through, which he later regretted. And we spoke about the influence of Abigail on David, and it all fit in very nicely with the insertion of chapter 25, the story of Naval and Abigail, which at first glance appears to be out of place. But actually, at the end of chapter 26, we realize that it was not out of place at all. It was in the perfect place to introduce Abigail and Abigail's influence over David. And our question that we are left with for next week is, who is Achimelech the Hittite, and what is he doing in this story? Any questions or comments before we go? Okay, in that case, we will see you. Oh, before I go, let's stop the recording. Let's stop the recording.